In this video, you'll learn the secrets on how to facilitate a great strategic planning session. Whether you're doing that with 5, 10, 15 people, it all comes down to seeing it as 3 distinct stages: the before, the during, and the after. And if you do the right things in each stage, you can get a fantastic result. I'm an expert in strategic decisions, and I've helped over 90 organizations facilitate and formulate a strategy. So I've been part of a lot of the sessions, so I can see kind of what works, what hasn't worked, and what are the essential elements that you need to really make them work. So let's jump right in. Let's start with the before. Right. So the first thing we want to know is who's going to be in the room. The sweet spot of people, in my opinion, is somewhere between 6 and 14. If you have too few people, you're really not going to get enough of a discussion, enough of a diverse point of view. You know, I've done it with maybe 3 people, and it's really tough. It's more of a summary, it doesn't quite work. So 6 at the minimum. At the high level, 14, that perhaps you can wiggle it a little bit to 15, 16, maybe even 18, as I've seen in some cases. But again, you're not gonna have 45 people here. You're not gonna have 25 people. The more people you have, the harder it is to get consensus. So stick to the sweet spot with a bit of wiggle room at the end or at the beginning when it comes to who's going to be in the room. Let's also talk about the person itself is going to be in the room, right? So first is, you know, how many people will be in the room. Then when it comes to the people themselves, you really want to stick to people who have authority to make changes to budget or personnel, who can be strategic, and who have strong opinions, which may be perhaps counterintuitive. So typically in an organization, you're really only talking about the executives or the leadership team, people who, you know, may have P&L responsibility, profit and loss, and of course, who have something to say, right? There's no point in having 10 people in the room who all think the same and are just going to agree to everything. So that's really the makeup. You're trying to avoid anyone who doesn't fit any of those 3 criteria. Next, it will be helpful to have some kind of pre-work document. Now I'm gonna share my screen here with you and show you a form I use. So I typically prepare maybe 4 or 5 questions for an organization before we actually do the session. And you can see some of the examples here, the questions. The questions themselves may not matter as much. You can choose your own. You can take some of these or add or subtract. But the point is to send this in some way. I like to send it as a survey, and then people can either fill this out in a written format. They could record themselves using their phone to get audio or a video. I've seen teams who organize town halls where you discuss these questions as a group. But the point here is, for the people who will be in the room, this starts their thinking. It kind of gets them into that mode so we can jump faster into the session. You'll see why that's important later on. And for people who may not be in the room, it gives them a chance to provide their feedback so that people who will be in the room can see that feedback. So some kind of pre-work element, survey, process is really helpful. It doesn't have to be complex, but something to think about. And the second thing I want to show you is being able to prepare an outline. Now, this strategic planning sessions are really a conversation. So I don't use PowerPoint, I don't use anything like that. I really just have something like this, right? So here's my outline, I have my sections. In my case, I am planning for 6 hours. So, you know, all the sections here basically add up to that with the breaks. But you can see it's all time. I have bullet points, I have stories, I have examples that I prepared that are relevant for this organization, exercises. So I just have this to go into it, right? And this is what, 2 pages, 3 pages, whatever it is, 4 pages. So once I have this, this guides my conversation. And I have a sense that this is what we'll be doing for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, where we are halfway through or at the end. So this is also really helpful. Now, let's talk about the during, right? The actual session itself. You really want to get into it right away. You can see in my outline, if you go back to it, that my introduction is really just 15 minutes. I think in the second half is 10 minutes. And that's just really, you know, I'm telling a story, I'm doing some housekeeping on how the session will go. I may do introductions. In this case, for someone like me who, you know, I'm an outsider, I want to know who's in the room and just get a 30-second from them. But of course, if you're an insider, you might not need that, so it's even shorter. But we really want to get into it right away. You know, this is what we're doing, and then jump into the first section, jump into the first exercise. You want to be a time czar. You really want to stick to the timings here. So you can see, you know, my sections are 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 15 minutes. I am very, very deliberate of sticking on time. I may go over if I see the conversation's going really well and it could benefit from another 5-10 minutes, but that means I have to get that from somewhere else. So I'm really careful about that. If I finish early, that's great. No one really dislikes finishing something early, so that's not an issue. But going over is an issue. So you really want to stick to that. You also want to think about creating what is called a critical issues list, something I got from Alan Weiss. And this is just to a place where you capture ideas or questions that are not relevant for a given section. For example, we may be discussing the mission and the vision of the organization, and someone says, this is really great, but we really need to fix our compensation system. So that's important, but not really relevant to this portion of the session. So I'm going to capture that in this critical issues. Again, just a list that may be visible in front of them. And at the end of the session or at different points, I'm checking in and saying, you know what, someone brought up the compensation system earlier. Maybe this is the time to discuss. Right? So that's a way for you to stay on track without being derailed, which is sometimes a big issue for this kind of conversations. Last two things, you really want to ask why until you're really tired of hearing it. Why are you doing this? Why this? Why not this? Why not this other option? Why? This starts to get deeper into the thinking of issues. The first thing someone might say is sort of their reaction, their initial thought, but by going deeper, we really start to find the essence. There's another video on my channel, which I'll link here, that is a 10-minute video on my approach to strategy, the specific sections you see here, why I do, race on Detra and vision, why I do this, what I call the sentient axis. So I'll link to that. I won't dive into this video for that, but check that out. Now we're in the after section of the session. So, if you did a great job, especially during the before and the during, this is the easiest, but there's a few things you want to ensure you do here. One is any kind of housekeeping. You want to maybe send a recording, notes, action items, some kind of way to summarize what just happened, put into your task management software, whatever you use. That's really the first step. The second step is to really schedule follow-ups to review key progress. So this may be a follow-up in a month to check in on how everyone's doing. It may be in 3 months, it may be in 2 weeks, it may be individual, it may be with a group, but just some kind of way to say, hey, this is the follow-up. I'm checking in to see if this is progressing as expected. And lastly, I would just get some feedback from key individuals. So if you have 15 people in the room, I may not ask all 15 individuals, but I may ask 2 or 3 people. I may ask the CEO and maybe some kind of VP of operations, whatever. Whoever brought me into the organization and who I think were very interested in this, I would get their feedback just to make sure that I kind of hit their expectations and that we cover everything. And if we didn't cover something, there's always an opportunity to do some kind of follow-up session and cover it there. So that's also a way to sort of solve any missing things. That is all I have for today. My name is Ruben Ugarte. I'm an expert in strategic decisions, and we just spent a little bit of time looking at the secrets of how to facilitate a great strategic planning session. Now, in the description box below, you'll find several things. One is a link to my newsletter on Substack, where I cover many of these ideas in more detail, cover great companies who are making great decisions. So check that out. It's free. It goes out every Tuesday at 5 a.m. Pacific time, 8 a.m. Eastern time. You're just going to find a link to my books on decision making and data and my website where you can find other resources. In the comment section below, I'd love to hear how you would take any of these ideas to improve your next strategic planning session. So let me know. As always, within YouTube, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, turn on the bell for notifications. Anything else you can do in YouTube to subscribe to my next videos. Until next time, talk soon.